Welcome to the Earth Day edition of Telusk Forum, an online video programme for everyone living in the Usk Valley.
In this programme we will focus on the environment. Earth Day was inaugurated in the USA on the 22nd of April 1970. It was to raise awareness of the damage that people were doing to the planet Earth. In 1990 the movement went global, and Earth Day last year, 2020, marked 50 years of the organisation, with global activities that aim to mobilise 1 billion people worldwide for transformative action on our planet. The theme this year is Restore Our Earth, and now 190 countries and 1 billion people are involved in this movement. So today we have taking part in the programme some of our young people who have strong views on how we should respect the planet.
I interview Rob Yorke and find out about countryside reconciliation and consider the likely implications of climate change on our local landscape.
Helen brings us a short poem entitled Earth's New Day, and we enjoy photographs taken on our recent visit to Lake Vyrnwy.
We find out about the Our Food initiative in the Usk Valley as I talk to their project manager, Duncan Fisher.
And finally, the Bevans and their friends invite you to join them in a new course exploring the wonders of the Bible. Enjoy the programme.
Our youth group this couple of months, we've been thinking about the nature in our area, and we have some ideas that we'd like to talk to you. Like as adults, they could plant more wildflowers for the bees or pollinators by the roads or by paths or spaces where there aren't any greenery. Or if someone's building new building estates, they could make hedgehog highways in the fences, so then hedgehogs will be able to get in and out easily without crossing any dangerous roads. And for litter, only 62% of people in England drop litter, but only 28% admit it. So you can get local groups or start new groups of children and adults to pick up litter by the roads.
I was coming out of maths today and I thought, well, if there is no animals, then there is no us, because the circle of life would be thrown out of balance. Even though animal extinction is a big problem, there is some simple things you can do. Try to use less food because forests are habitats, and support animal charities if you can. Time for action. The clock is ticking.
Time for action, and take it now.
Us humans, as such a superior race, are so powerful that we just dominate all other things on the earth. I mean, sure, like some animals may be able to use tools, but they'll never come even close to making a car. And because we are sitting so comfortably at the top of the food chain, we often forget about how all the other animals and other people, in fact, are suffering. Different regions may not be sitting as comfortably, water loss might be a bigger reason, and also global warming is a big problem as well. A lot of animals do suffer, and it's not like they don't really matter, because we use them for a lot of things and we would not survive without them. And not only the animals, but also the trees, all of the plants, all creatures, all very, very important to our living. But the reason why we often overlook this is because a lot of us are sitting so comfortably, we don't really are able to sympathise a lot with all the other people who are suffering. Sure, we might know that they are suffering, but because we don't really suffer ourselves that much, we don't really know how they feel. So it's great to have an open mind and think to yourself, well, I might be feeling well, I might be healthy, but how are other people feeling? And that would be a great step towards helping people all over the world and animals and plants alike. Sure, things like plastic, fossil fuels are great inventions, and it is good to use them. They are very helpful to what we do in our lives. However, we must not become too reliant on them, because that is one of the main reasons why we affect a lot of the animals and places on our Earth.
I think that the main issue with climate change is it's being dealt with in the wrong way, like on too small a scale. Like, take plastic recycling, for example. Like, you go out to the shops, you do your weekly shopping, you take it home, and then you recycle the plastic packaging. And that's good. Like, it's great to recycle plastic like that. But then, next week comes around, you go out and you've got to buy food again. So, it's more plastic packaging, and like, it never really stops. And so the problem needs to be stopped, like, at the top. Like, we need to get, like, companies and all to stop using plastic packaging, so then we can recycle all of the plastic and reduce the damage that we're doing to the planet. And you can use that example for almost everything to do with climate change. Things are being left to ordinary everyday people when it would be much more suitable to, like, the people with power are the ones who can do things, and they're not doing things. Like, I don't really have much power, I can't influence anything, but like politicians and stuff and the people who own these companies, they can do something, but they're not doing something. So what we need to do is, like, band together, because if enough of us tell them to do something, eventually they're going to have to do it. Like, it's been seen in the past, if enough people, like, come together with the same cause, they can make change. And I think that's the most important. We need to focus on the big things. Like, yes, it's good, keep doing your little things, it does add up, but it can't add up to save the planet. It needs big change if we want to save the planet.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have Rob Yorke here on the Telusk programme this week. Rob will be a familiar face to many, but for some he'll be a new face, and it's an opportunity to get to know you, Rob. I know very little about your work, but I know that you call yourself a countryside reconciliation practitioner. I'm going to find out a little bit more about that later on, probably. But Rob, there's much talk in the media about rewilding and its benefits, and about tree planting for nature recovery. However, this appears sometimes to conflict with what we hear about the views of some of the farmers who've been custodians of the land for many generations. Do you have any views on this topic?
What a question to start with, Julian. I mean, coming straight in with the curveball, when in fact, I want to talk about a little bit of context. Let's wind back 5,000 years, and when the UK started to farm, to clear the forest in order to produce food and to be able to construct boats and navies, etc. And I think that context, and of course, we've got a couple of world wars to slip in there as well, because all of that history and all of that past is really important context as to why we are here today. And I think we miss that too often. I think the modern way is to come up with a solution without any context about what's gone beforehand. So when you ask, what do I think about rewilding and planting lots of trees? Well, let's start with World War II, which actually had ramifications for tree planting, rewilding, food production, etc. And as you know, after the war, we as an island were terrified of losing our self-sufficiency in food production. And so the government, of course, used all methods to encourage farmers, land managers to produce more food. The Archers in 1955 was a government information program to encourage farmers to grow more food, to use efficient methods. And so that generation of farmers are still with us now at the kitchen table. And I've written about this quite a lot. The same generation post-war are at the kitchen table as we ask new generations of farmers and land managers and foresters, because of course that was the same thing that applied to forestry. And 2 years ago, the Forestry Commission was 100 years old. That was about producing more timber in the UK. And so the landscape changed hugely in that time. But we mustn't forget that generation of farmers are still with us at that kitchen table. And I think that's the big journey, is to reconcile, and I've just used that word now because there are so many shifting objectives which have suddenly appeared, which go contrary to what farmers and land managers were asked to do 40, 50 years ago, which to most people is a long time ago, but not in the context of UK countryside. That's a blip. We find it hard to maybe grapple with some of these things. I get terrified, like everyone else, about how big this is. And so what someone told me the other day is that within our DNA, our ancient DNA is this simplicity. We want it simple. And that's based on, we hear a rustle in the undergrowth and we want to know, is it going to kill us or not? We want A or B. We want binary. Because I've always railed against things are too binary, things are too reductionist, too simple. And it was wonderful having that explained about that's how we want to see things, A or B, good or bad. And that loses all the nuance. And so that's why, as a rural reconciliator, as a rural commentator, I'm incredibly unpopular because I'm digging out the nuance between all of these different issues. And there's a lovely saying from a philosopher from the 19th century: for every complex problem, there is an answer which is clear, simple, and wrong. Now that really, that gets people's goats. So the long-term survivability of the human race on the planet, and the planet, by the way, is going to be fine because, again, humans are only a tiny blip on it. Politicians go against that. So in fact, we have a democracy, which is wonderful, but actually it's contrary to what it should be for the long-term survival of possibly the human race. But maybe we're getting too deep at this time of the morning.
So you talk about countryside reconciliation. What do you mean by that term? Who are you reconciling, and what are the main issues that you're reconciling between them?
And it's not for me to reconcile anybody. It's up to everybody what they want to do. But I suppose I might give an example. About 8 years ago, I gave a little talk in Cumioy Village Hall, just down the road from where I live in the Black Mountains. And it was about this idea of rewilding, which some people see as just managing land in a different way. Other people see it as a way of reclaiming the land from humans and letting it go back to nature. Many definitions around it. And I suppose my role was to petition the hill farmers to be in the room. And so I went round to the doors, knocked on the doors, rang some of the hill farmers who live up behind me, because I wanted them to be in the room, to be part of this conversation, bottom up, to hear it. I wasn't there to say, this is the way to do it. I just wanted to air something which the complex narrative needed to be just framed in all its complexity, and then people can understand what we need to deal with. Because at this stage, a number of commentators who push rewilding, and they put it in a newspaper, and then it goes viral on social media. And actually that bypasses the people who need to be part of the conversation, who may not be the same people as those that want to be part of the conversation. Subtle difference there. People that need to be part of it are those the people that live in these hills, which I would argue in the Black Mountains are being rewilded anyway. There used to be 150 little farm holdings tucked away up in these hills, all farming intensively, not intensification, not with sprays, intensively surviving over 20 acres, growing barley, potatoes, and pigs. Lovely little mixed farm holdings. Those have all gone now, and the scrub is coming. And it's a wild place. I love it. And so we've got this highly bucolic, beautiful countryside with a highly urbanized nation. And we've got to reconcile how we live our lives. And that's all of us. That's not just the hill farmer scratching a living on the hills. It's the person driving the SUV with the heating on at 19, 20, 21 degrees, blocking up the gaps to make it more energy efficient, which of course is good, unless of course you want swifts and swallows and house martins. But that's another debate, because everything is about trade-offs.
Okay, can we move on to another question, which is about climate change? Obviously, we're looking to become more of a zero carbon economy over the next few years. What implications do you think that will have on our local landscape? Particularly as I suppose we're looking to use renewable energy more than we have done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think before renewable energy, we've got to look at energy efficiency, which is so dull. It's really not going to get the headlines of saying we need to create more energy. It's the dull stuff, which is not wasting energy, making our houses more efficient. And of course, the government's been talking about this. We all thought gas boilers were brilliant. We all thought diesel cars were brilliant. In fact, that's now going to become outdated, and we've got to have hydrogen boilers and we have electric cars. So the cost ramification is the first thing. When you're talking about the landscape, well, the landscape is evolving continually. We like to stick it into aspect. I mean, I live in the Brecon Beacons National Park, wonderful place. However, the policy of the national park is somewhat prescriptive, and it says this is the landscape that we like and we want, but it's going to involve change. Some of it would be very positive. So if we still need to have livestock. I think there's this kind of livestock are bad, veganism is the way forward. That's another simplistic binary way of looking at something. However, it does also mean that we need to change our farming practices, and there will be winners and losers. And I think we can make that journey in a much better way. But I also accept that if people want to lobby and to look after what they've done for generations, it's very understandable to want to do that. So I think as a society, we've got to somehow create a conduit, a way of doing this transition. So I think we're in a very dysfunctional time, and I think we have to be in a way, because that's the only way. For out of chaos will come some kind of order, but it's going to take maybe 15, 20 years, and there will be collateral. And I think that's the toughest thing, is that the ways that we used to do things will change, but it's how we manage that change, which to me is about trying to do the reconciliation. When you ask me the question about how the landscape will change due to climate change, well, we've got to be careful about the trees that we're planting now. If we're planting lovely native trees, they might all be dead in 15 years' time because climate change has overtaken them. So I've been arguing, and I've written about it in the Times, we should be planting all types of trees. We must get away from ideology and ideals about native trees only. We've got to look at all kinds of trees. And I'm lucky to have a couple of acres here. And 8 years ago, I planted my wood, and it's got 23 different types of trees. It's got Norway spruce, it's got birch, it's got cherry trees. But I didn't do it with a public grant because they would have told me what to do. So kind of climate change is going to tell us what to do, but we won't be able to do it within the books that we want to do it in.
Yes. So Rob, finally, as a church warden, and with a sort of a church perspective on the environment, is there any, does this make any difference to the way that you view countryside issues?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of my biggest driving things within me, it's a kind of burning flame, is to stand up for remote rural communities. Now, I know there's lots of non-remote rural communities, but I'm thinking about rural communities who are distant to a lot of these conversations, and the way that regulations sometimes come from the top down rather than trying to work with local communities to work out what the regulations would be, which would also sustain the rural economy, which is a part of the rural community. And I think the church's role, and yeah, I know you don't want me to say this, but in order to keep the little church going and to keep a place of succor where people can come together, it's really important to sometimes break a few rules so that people can come to service, a small service, even if it's outside, it's all space, but it's apparently not in the book. And that is more important, to keep those communities together. And also in this time of massive change, I want farmers and land managers and foresters to be able to stay in that community, but they're going to have to change. Some of them are going to have to change what they're producing. And rather than them throw in the towel, I'm really keen that people can adjust. And I'm being hesitant because it's not an easy journey. We need rural psychologists within the rural sector right now. And again, I suppose that, for many, the church is a psychologist. And I think that's a really important role. But it's not in the book. It's done in a different way because that's how the countryside's always operated.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. That leaves us with something very much to think about as we think about the church's role in society today. And perhaps a lot of us may not have thought about our role in relation to farming and the landscape, but you've given us plenty to reflect on there. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you, Julian.
This poem is one of optimism that perhaps the next coming generation will help save our planet. It's called Earth's New Day. Plastic's unseen film means fish just can't swim. Yet petrolheads still roar, pollute the planet as before. Animals cry, crops fail and babies die. Ice flows drift, jet stream slips, the walrus slides down the spirals of these times. Yet the young call us out, plant trees, house bats and bees, collect polythene, open your eyes. They hold banners that scream, save the earth, she dies, don't patronize with hateful lies. Earth's time is running, Earth's new day is coming.
Welcome to Duncan Fisher to our programme today. Very good to have you with us. And Duncan is a project manager for the Our Food initiative, which has been set up recently for the Usk Valley. I know Duncan lives not far from me in Crickhowell, and it's lovely that you've set this up. But quite honestly, I don't know very much about it. So perhaps you'd like to just explain what the Our Food initiative is and why you went about setting it up in the first place.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks very much. I love talking about this project. So the reason we set it up was to rebuild a local food economy where food is grown by local farms for local people and local people buy it and eat it. But since the Second World War, we've had an agricultural system which has encouraged a completely different model, where food is grown here, it's driven out of the region, and then we all go to the supermarket and we buy food back in. And so there's a complete disconnect between local farms and local people. And the other thing from the economic point of view is that there's most of the profit is made after it leaves the farm and until it gets onto our plates. And if all of that process is outside the region, then we're not really doing very well here. We're missing out on the biggest chunk. So we need a system whereby that food chain is local, it's owned as much as possible by local farmers, certainly by local businesses, so that all the profit that happens in that process stays here. So basically that's what we're trying to do, but it's very, very difficult because there's so many aspects to that. There's so many different things that have to happen for a local economy to take place, and when nothing's there, it's very difficult to start anything because everything needs everything else. So the Our Food project is a long-term project where we are saying, right, we're going to over 10 years, we're going to completely rebuild this. But that's a big undertaking. But that's basically what we're doing.
And have you got quite a few people who are involved in the organisation as well? Have other people sort of taken up the inspiration from you setting this up?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing that we have to start with is more growing for local consumption. Because if there isn't that, then really nothing else can happen. So we've been talking to people who are starting new enterprises for local food. And if everyone living in Krakow will have noticed that the farm that has appeared opposite the Old Victor estate, the Langtons farm. So that's something we've been supporting. And that is a model of a very, very highly productive small farm that can provide a remarkable amount of food off an incredibly small amount of space. And that's a great model because it's in itself a good business, and it's absolutely supplying the local economy. The good news for them and for all the other farmers in that position is that the demand for local food is much higher than what is produced. So there's a big waiting list. Everyone who's providing local food has a big waiting list, which is a fantastic situation. So the people we're working with most closely are these new what we would call farming entrepreneurs. But then we're also working with the National Park Authority and with Monmouthshire County Council because they want to support the local economy, the regional economy, and being a rural economy, this is a big part of its future. So they're supporting us, and we're starting now to work with lots of the other agencies that will help us with this. So, for example, this kind of farming employs a lot more people than existing farming. So we're going to have a whole big new workforce over the next 10 years, which is a good opportunity for young people. Right. So we have to recruit that, and that means talking to the colleges, and that's the whole sort of area of how do we find the right people. We're talking to people who deal with finance. How do we get loan funds? How do we get startup grant funds? How do we have to build all of those because none of them exist, and so on. So there's quite a lot of stakeholders getting involved, but we started with the farming entrepreneurs. They are the key. They generate everything.
So is your vision then to mainstream this not only in rural areas but in more urban areas as well? I mean, obviously the opportunity is perhaps in the more rural parts. Yeah, no, we can't fix the whole world. We can do something very well in this region. There are very good people in all the other regions that can do very good things in those regions too. So we work with them and exchange them. There are networks of us doing this sort of thing. But no, our focus is to do it well in one region because that isn't really being done. There are lots of projects which are about bits of the puzzle, like a fund for this or let's train up some farmers and this. But unless you do everything that is needed to in one place, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. You've got to fix everything at the same time in the same place for anything to happen. And yes, we do want to mainstream. We're not thinking small here. We've calculated that if you wanted to supply year-round vegetables to everyone who lives in Monmouthshire and the Brecon Beacons, you would need 1,200 acres of the kind of farming that you see opposite the Old Victor estate. Yeah.
Now, that's not a huge amount. I mean, there's a whole lot more land around than that. But it gives you kind of scale. It's sort of, well, that's kind of what we're talking about. 1,200 acres. Well, that's what you could break that down and say, well, that's 5 big farms. So it's not huge and not like impossible, but it's a lot still, especially when at the moment we're on 3.
Yes, yeah. And your role is presumably to act as a sort of catalyst to help both those who want to put this into place and also to work with the authorities to help them to focus their attention, their money in the right directions.
Yeah, I buzz around, trying to make everything happen. It's a plate spinning exercise. You just got to keep a whole load of plates spinning, and you've got to look. You know, a lot of things take a long time to form. So, for example, we don't have a huge demand for a startup fund at the moment, but they take a long time to build. And we don't want to be caught out in 2 years' time and not have that fund when it really need it. So we have to start building that now. So there's a lot of background work that is going on where we're looking forward and thinking, well, you know, what's going to be the weak link in the chain? What's going to be the thing that isn't there that stops everything else happening? That's our job, is to find. You know, to see what's not going to work and fix it. So I will spend the next years just running around fixing gaps and things like that. That's the job of the.
So it sounds as if there's a lot of demand for the produce when it comes out of the ground.
Yeah, well, that's.
Is there anything that, I mean, would you be encouraging people to buy into this, or
absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I mean, if anyone's watching this, you want local vegetables, just, you know, all you have to do if you want to make contact with the Langtons is go and look over their gate, and they'll come and talk to you, because, you know, that they're very friendly, and sign up. I mean, you may need to go on a waiting list, but, you know, absolutely do, because the longer their waiting list, the more they can commit, the more confidence they have to grow it.
Because the next people will have to come and do the same thing.
Absolutely, and they may expand if whatever. I mean, it depends on what goes, but absolutely, I think, and their marketing. Well, they're not really marketing. They're just doing it. They tell people on Facebook what they're doing, and then they deliver a door, and the neighbours see that there's something being delivered, so they ask them what it is, and then they say, well, can I go on the list? It's like that. It's so simple, actually. Yeah. So if you want, I mean, the Langtons, they sell, we have them, we're a customer. So every Thursday we get our box. It's actually a bag at the moment because of COVID. They can't take anything back. So, you know, they have to give you something, but they will eventually be boxes that you return to them. And you get a selection of vegetables. You've got different sizes of box, depending on how big your family is. But then they also sell eggs. They've got chickens. So, and they sell meat chickens as well. So they have those. And they also sell the apple juice that's produced by
John Morris.
By John Morris, because they've leased land off him.
Yeah.
So it's his land.
Yeah.
So they'll sell that too. And it's lovely. I mean, as a customer, it's lovely. It just arrives every Thursday afternoon, and we don't buy anything else. That's it. We stop buying. We don't buy vegetables at all, because that's quite enough. And it's it's really, and well, obviously the quality is amazing, because they are using, that's something I hadn't mentioned, was that their techniques are what they call regenerative farming, which is a sort of very high-end quality. They don't, for example, the key with regenerative farming is that you're building the soil, and that what that does is you don't plough the soil. So ploughing the soil breaks it up, breaks the system. It releases lots of carbon when you plough soil. But if you don't plough it, you just grow things in it, you cut them, the roots die off, and you plant again. And so you're just putting stuff constantly into the soil, and you're not taking anything out. So what happens is the soil gets more and more dense in carbon. It you get loads more worms, and it becomes alive. And another thing is it becomes extremely water absorbent. I mean, it holds a vast quantity of water, which of course in the current climate is important, because one, we have floods half of the year and droughts the other half of the year, and at both times you need water absorbent soil, either to hold the water and keep it where it's needed, rather than straight into the river or just drying out. So there's a lot of, that is a big focus of their farm. They don't just not create carbon, they pull carbon out of the atmosphere.
Well, I'm afraid, Duncan, we've probably run out of time now, but
Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk together. I could carry on probably for at least the same time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
But it's been really great to catch up with you, and thank you for coming on the programme.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheerio.
Okay, so I thought we'd talk about some of our favourite lit. So, Sian, what pushes your button?
So I bought The Best of Saki, which is a short story compilation by H.H. Munro. And the stories are like vibrant jewels. They make an imprint on your life. You can read them again and again, and they show you a different aspect of your personality.
I haven't got my book with me because I read it a very long time ago. And yes, I still read books, but this one I read 3 or 4 or 5 times because I just loved the idea. It was called The Far Pavilions. But it was the idea of a woman leaving her safety zone, which was a palace with marble floors, and stepping out into the world and walking towards a funeral pyre with her husband, where she committed sati, which is an Indian tradition, is it, Jeremy? I'm not sure, but anyway, she lay with her husband and died with him. And I was just fascinated by that, and it actually got me interested in traveling to India. So that's where I went and spent a good 6 months there exploring and looking for these beautiful marble palaces. I loved the book. 3, 4, 5 times I read it.
My book is Lee Child the Visitor. It's not high-class literature in any sense of the word, any sense of the term, but it's compelling, entertaining, page-turning, exciting, all those kinds of things.
So what's good about it?
What's good about it is that there's a hero who you get behind and want him to survive the massive uncomfortable scrapes that he gets into. And basically he's doing it for the purpose of good, so you've kind of got a moral background about that as well.
There we go.
What about you, Jeremy?
Well, I've always liked reading. It's never been a problem. And I used to read books repeatedly, loads and loads of times. And 2 books, or 3 books I read a lot when I was younger, Tom Jones, Once and Future King, and The Lord of the Rings. And I'd be hard-pressed really to choose one of them, because they're all about people going on journeys and growing up. But I think for this purpose, maybe The Once and Future King is good. Because in it, it's actually 4 books in one binding there. And 2 boys are described in their childhoods. And how they grow up, how they become the men they have to be, how they have their own internal struggles and how they work through them, and how in the end they're defeated by their inner weaknesses, but they're kind of heroically defeated. They're heroes. And I could identify with the weaknesses and the inner conflict of them. And they actually are Sir Lancelot and King Arthur. And it's beautifully written. It's a very well written book.
So I suppose what we're trying to say here is we've all got books that we love and have read over and over again, from this kind of literature to that kind of literature to wow, that kind of literature. And the Bible course is about the best-selling novel of all time.
It's not a novel.
It's not a novel, of course it's not. What is it then? It's
literature.
It's literature. It's full of short stories, it's got heroes, more heroes and journeys and
life stories.
That's it. And
stories.
and we can find characters in the Bible that can relate to our lives in the same way as all these books have related to our lives, and that's what the Bible course will do for us. And so it's just a good course.
In a way, this kind of epitomizes the Bible, in that although this, as John says, perhaps is not great literature, this does have the hero, the indestructible hero, who solves the problem, who fixes it, and he's a good guy.
And with this book, the Bible is just a collection of lots of books put into one big book, as per this one. And yeah, and
Okay. So come to the Bible course. Find out just
Come
what
to the
great
Bible
literature
course.
really is.
come be with wonderful people like us.